Hello, fellow wargamers and history buffs. Today we're going to be taking a look at some games that are a fun and appropriate way to introduce kids to Napoleonic wargaming and Napoleonic history. Let's take a look. So earlier this summer, I was teaching a history camp focusing on Napoleonic history. And this was for a group of kids basically aged about 9 up to about 13. So 4th grade up to about 8th grade. And the class itself was covering from the French Revolution basically until Napoleon's exile and death on St. Helena. And the part of the class that was fun was introducing the kids to different types of games and war games. And so I thought I would touch on some of the different ones that I used for the class. And of course, I will then try to have some videos that go into a little bit more depth about the games themselves, some reviews or some tutorials on the games. So let's take a look at the games as they were presented. The first game that we played was one where we introduced the kids to the combined arm tactics of the Napoleonic period. It's kind of a card game that we created on ourselves, and it had kind of like a rock, paper, scissors type of approach to things. So you had cards that represented cavalry, artillery, and infantry, and then we introduced infantry in different types of formations. The kids watched a video about the sort of tactical uses of infantry at the time, and there's a link below. It's a great video if you haven't seen it yet. And that was a fun game. The kids got to be creative with coloring in the cards with different colors for uniforms. Plus they got creative with using multiple cards sometimes, sometimes having the cards hidden. And so they had a lot of fun, and it gave them a good appreciation for the different types of tactics on the battlefield at the time period. Now, the next game that we looked at was Navíos de Línea, Trafalgar 1805. Now, this is a game with miniature ships. And so the kids we were talking, of course, about the different naval conflicts during the Napoleonic period. And the kids had a chance to kind of get a sense of, okay, you just can't move your ship anywhere. The way the wind's blowing is going to have some sort of effect on things. And having a small miniature kind of made it a little bit more fun and exciting. The rules for this one were pretty simple, so the kids were able to kind of get into it and enjoy blowing up each other's ships and knocking out each other's sails and boarding parties and things like that. It took them a little bit of time to get a sense of the rules, but altogether had a good time with this one. Now, the other naval game that we did was a fun card game. This is called Enemy in Sight. I played a copy of this back 30 some odd years ago. It was published originally by Avalon Hill, and it's a great fun game where you have cards that represent the different ships from the time period, and then you have a hand with action cards in it. If any of you have ever played the Avalon Hill Naval War card game, this was their 18th century equivalent of it. A lot of fun, easy to play. The kids had a ball playing this one. All right, the next game that we played, or a modified version of it that we played, was Clash of Arms Legion of Honor. Now, this is a card game that's from, anywhere from 1 to 6 players. Due to time constraints and the fact that I had 14 kids in the class, we couldn't play the game as it's originally designed or intended to. So we had to do a modified version of it. And so what I came up with was a bingo version of the game. So I took a lot of the concepts and the cards, the different activities that might happen to you as a fledgling officer making your way to your marshal's baton, and I turned those into different spots on a bingo card. And then I would draw chits, and then the kids would either mark that square, or if it was the case of maybe a duel or some other type of event, they'd roll a die to see if they were successful in their duel or successful capturing the redoubt or whatnot. They would then mark their spot. For a lot of the kids, this was a great way to kind of introduce them to the concepts of what you would have been going through as a soldier or an officer in the time period. So while I enjoy Legion of Honor, it was a little too much for the kids to do in the short time constraint that we had. But this was a fun way to try to convert the concepts into something that would fit within an hour class. Now, the next game that we played was Albuera 1811 from White Dog Games. I had downloaded, they have a digital copy that you can purchase, and I went over to the Office Depot, had maps made, had counters printed out, and which I then mounted onto chipboard and then assembled. And you can see the video I did on making your own counters using chipboard for that. This was a good game. The kids had fun with this. The rules were easy enough that most of them could get it. I'm sure a lot of them weren't quite playing with all the rules, but they had fun rolling the dice and wiping out each other's units. And so it altogether was another successful one, getting across the concepts from the time period, as well as introducing what's going on in Spain with the Napoleonic Wars. Last but not least, we got out an old classic, diplomacy. Of course, Napoleon is brought down by a coalition of neighbors, enemies of France, enemies of the revolution, enemies of liberty. And so, therefore, playing diplomacy was good. It was a way for... So even though the map is a different time period, the nations are slightly different, it got across the idea of working with your neighbors to put together alliances and then breaking those alliances and everything else. Of course, I had my old version available. You can buy newer versions of diplomacy. I think Hasbro is currently printing those. And so you can find a copy if you don't have one. A lot of fun. The kids really got a blast out of this one. We played this for a couple of days. And altogether, a good game, particularly since 7 players, and I had 2 maps going with all 14 kids engaged in one game or the other. Now, in addition to having the kids play some different games, I was, of course, able to bring a number of my Napoleonic games to show them, particularly ones from Clash of Arms, where we had long, large battlefields. I had the Austerlitz game from both pub battles and also from Marshall Enterprises. And that gave us a chance to talk a little about scale for war games. Whether you're dealing with something that is a core level, you can have, the map can be smaller, more condensed, or if you're dealing with something that's battalion level, you need to have a bigger map to encapsulate all the important aspects of the battlefield. So we talked about, not only just the history, but also then different ideas or concepts with wargaming, the use of dice, in some cases like diplomacy, there's no luck at all, and talked about different types of dice, how you're going to get different results depending on what you're using. So altogether, it was a lot of fun. These are some great games that you can use if you've got children or grandchildren that are interested in learning, or you want to get them involved in wargaming. These are some fun ways to do that. So until our next episode, be well, and if you've got any comments, make a note there. Definitely hit the like button. The Emperor would be disappointed in you if you did not hit the like button. And of course, if you have any comments or questions, you go ahead and put them down in the notes below. Take care.